This is a presentation on interfaith marriages. This explores ways we can use emotionally focused therapy to help couples navigate faith transitions together. A faith transition is when somebody begins to move away from a set of beliefs that they had once held. This can mean they're moving away from a religion or towards a religion. And it can be a really exciting time, but it also can be a really scary process for both individuals and for couples in a marriage. It can be a really scary time for the believing spouse because they might be really unsure about what this means for their future. When they were first married, they probably had this idea of what their life would look like with their partner, and oftentimes their religion is really at the center of the way they predict the future. This can be a really scary time for the transitioning spouse as well because they're not sure what this is going to look like, whether their spouse is going to be supportive or how they're going to balance their differences in religion. Because there's a lot of fear, this can be manifested through withdrawing from one another or from lashing out in anger. And this can often be what ends up bringing this couple into family therapy. Emotionally focused couples therapy is a great tool we can use to help couples who are navigating this change. The first step is uncovering hurt and longing buried under anger and withdrawal. So like I said before, a lot of the times what's underneath that anger and withdrawal is hurt, but it's also a lot of fear and of feeling disconnected from one another because of this kind of huge difference that has suddenly become uncovered. And then step 2 is helping couples understand how their hurt and longing affects their relationship. So helping them see how these fears and this hurt is making them withdraw from one another or being angry with one another can help them really want to take those steps to move forward and kind of change the way that they are interacting. Approaching these couples with EFT can help them sympathize with one another as they see what's really underneath the anger. While talking with a therapist, and talking about those emotions, they can see each other in a kind of a new light and see that they're vulnerable and they're scared, and so they sympathize with one another, and this can really help them communicate their emotional and their attachment needs. Working with a therapist, they can really find the tools that they need to kind of change their interactions and maybe get rid of some feedback loops and some loops of anger or being this pursuer or withdrawing from one another and distancing themselves from each other, and eventually have more open and honest communication. One thing that can really help couples kind of reestablish their connection and find empathy for one another is having them really discuss and focus on their similar values instead of on their theological differences. Usually underneath a lot of religious principles or commandments are values that we hold even if we're not particularly religious. For example, in the LDS faith, they believe in something called the word of wisdom, and this is a commandment that commands you to not partake in alcohol or smoking or using tobacco products, and ask you to abstain from recreational use drugs as well. While the transitioning spouse might not believe this to be a commandment from God, they probably have a value that's very similar that involves taking care of their bodies and making sure they stay healthy. So if you can get down to the root of that value, to the common denominator, they can really find the things that they have in common and kind of rebuild that foundation that they might feel like they lost by having their partner stop believing in the religious values. We've got this little quick video from Jessica Jackley and Risa Aslan. They have a whole TED Talk here that talks about that answers a lot of common questions they get about their interreligious marriage. But I like this clip at the end where they talk about common values and ways and values they have as a family, even though they have different religious affiliations.
Will allow them to dig those deep wells one day, over time. We're coming together on a weekly basis to pray, to meditate, to talk about the things that are important, have fellowship. We think those practices will allow them eventually to dig deep. And these values, we really also believe that these values, no matter what language they eventually choose, will be the things that they hold dear and carry with them. These values that we're raising them with, no matter what religion they choose. We believe that this is true because so many of the world's religions do share so many of the same values.
And so we want them to go around the world and to experience all these different religions. But most importantly, we want them not just to learn these values, but we want them to put these values into play in the world. I mean, after all, what's the point of having beliefs if you're not willing to act them out in the world?
So, because we believe in compassion as a family, they make those steps themselves. Because we believe, this slide, because we believe in compassion, we serve together. Because we believe in generosity, we give together. Because we believe in truthful, we don't hide things from each other. Because we believe in justice, and we believe in justice, we fight for that together. And most of all, above everything else, because we believe in love, we decide to see each other, hear each other, to respect each other, to stand, and to choose togetherness every day, differences and all. Thank you.
It's so important that we are learning to understand interfaith marriages and unique challenges they might face, because it's becoming more and more common, as we can see in this graph here. But it's also important to remember that while the content of these marriages and their issues might be different, we can use a lot of the same processes, and we see that they use a lot of the same processes, so that can really help us as we work with them through marriage and family therapy.